Hey everyone, welcome to a very special episode from Pro Engineering. This is episode 400, and what I wanted to do for this episode is highlight a car that is not a Hornet. What we're looking at here is technically a Hornet. Okay, this is a Hornet. Not only is this a Hornet, but this is my first Hornet. It is a car that since I think 91, maybe even before that, 90 or even 89, when I first got a book that showcased a Hornet, that I have been absolutely in love with this car. Yes, it's not a performance car. It handles like a shopping cart if the shopping cart was broken and had worse suspension and was thrown down a hill. That's about how a Hornet handles, but it doesn't really matter because it's a lot of fun to play with, and more importantly, it's absolutely gorgeous. This one here has got some pink decals from MCI Racing, but whether or not your Hornet is dead stock, heavily customized, the Hornet is an absolute gem. Well, I've loved this car so much that I created Superfly, Superfly 2, and finally, my friends, we have Superfly 3. This car has been in the works since 2010. That was when I started building Superfly. Initially, it was just some modified parts here and modified parts there, and then it turned into a body and suspension. Then Superfly 2 happened, and that got rear independent suspension, but I still felt like I was building upon the same, I hesitate to say inferior, we'll call them basic underpinnings. And I simply was kind of done with that. What I was not done with was the Hornet's gorgeous looks, and that's what this car has maintained. When building this car, I had a few stipulations. One, factory body had to fit, mostly unmodified. Second thing, wheel track had to be identical, wheelbase had to be identical. But then there was another problem, and that happened with Superfly 2. I couldn't fit the stock wheels and tires. Though this car is not running the stock wheels, it is running the stock tires. These tires, although terrible, are part of what give the Hornet its iconic look. So you can swap them out to whatever you want. But this car, the basic Superfly 3, had to fit the stock tires. Other than that, Tamiya part-wise, we have the front axle. That's a Tamiya part. Most of the hardware, Tamiya. I'm probably forgetting something. Oh, yes. The gears in the gearbox. Everything else is 100% Ampro. Let's investigate a little bit further. So the rear wing comes off. Now this is another Superfly feature. A lot of my cars do not require the factory wing because that just rips off when you look at it. So stock body comes straight off. As I mentioned, some modifications are necessary. Obviously, the car has double wishbone front suspension, and as a result, you need to make a notch here. It also has proper front shock towers, so you're going to have to make a bigger notch there. At the rear, I also had to fit the top of the shock. This is a result of geometry and existing components and the envelope I was working on, so I wasn't too happy about this. What we are looking at here is a full tube frame chassis. And no, not like the BBX. The BBX is like this car. Remember that I created this nearly 2 years ago, so it's been around quite a while. The Ampro cage has been around for quite some time, and it does bolt onto the factory Hornet chassis. In fact, that's kind of what I've done here is I've, in true Tamiya fashion, held over a lot of Superfly parts for Superfly 3. For example, the front suspension, that's all Superfly. The battery door, Superfly. And you'll notice that I kept it asymmetric because it was part of the charm of the Hornet. It has a lot of the details that the Hornet chassis always had. I wanted to maintain the look and feel of the Tamiya that the car was spiritually attached to. Even the rear wing mount, that's just an old school Superfly part. It's been around for probably 12 or 13 years. So those of you who have over the years modified your Hornet with Ampro Superfly parts, a lot of those parts are here now. I saw no point to change them. The chassis, although does not appear to be a tube frame chassis, it is. These are just skins that are on the sides. Same with the front. So the entire car is a rigid monocoque. So it is everything that you see, every tube, every beam, every bar, they're not decorative. Some are decorative. It's all here to create a very, very, very rigid chassis. There are some weird things here as well that some people may look at and go, why did you do that? For example, a common failure point on the Tamiya Hornet chassis are the bumper mounts. So there are 3 mounts over here. I would say 70 or 80% of the chassis that I've picked up used over the years have these snapped off. In fact, when testing this, some problems occurred and I nailed the curb full speed, sheared both of them off. Well, the good news is this part here, it's not part of the chassis like it was on the Hornet. It's actually part of this gray piece here and right there. So yeah, I broke it. I just unscrewed these parts, took it off, threw it away, and replaced it. The chassis was completely unharmed. At the rear, again, that rear shock mount, that's a long time AmPro part. Well, that helps to integrate the chassis with the cage at the rear. And this whole mounting system, well, those of you who have a Tamiya Hornet, you've seen that before. It's straight off the Hornet. The rear shock tower, again, it's a separate component that integrates with the cage. And if you take a hard tumble and shear off a corner, who cares? This is about a $7 or $8 part. Big deal. So that was kind of the methodology behind building this car. These are the AmPro 20mm offset front A-arms, and as a result of using these, I was able to re-engineer a shock tower that, like my Falcon shock tower, encapsulates the top of the shock and allows you to run a shock absorber here at the front that is oil-filled without any weird pogo pin coming out of the top. And should you shear off the shock tower in an accident, not a problem. It is attached with 3 or 4 bolts. I can't recall. It looks like 3. I also modified the servo. It is no longer wedged in this area here with unequal length steering rods. Now it is on this plate back in here. It is a weird size servo. There's going to be a link. Don't worry. Links to everything will come during the build videos, which are done. Everything will be listed out. There's a full bill of materials. You'll get everything. The entire steering system on here is ball raced. Everything is fully symmetric. So you can see it right in there. Completely new steering system for this vehicle. I went ahead and added a instrument panel because why not? Steering wheel sounds like fun. Why not? Factory driver still fits. And I added this velocity stack because I always felt that this car was front engine, not rear engine. So that's why we've got these velocity stacks and these lovely exhaust pipes. All of these are pick and choose. You can get these panels without the slot in there, so you don't have to have those. You don't really need any of this stuff. You can make this thing look like a completely factory Hornet. Even these Nerf bars, you can use the factory Nerf bar. It works completely as the original would. I just decided to make unique ones. Now, there's a lot of features on Superfly 3 that do not need to just live on Superfly 3. As I mentioned, the front suspension is all off-the-shelf AmPro parts. However, there is something unique about this car that will bolt directly onto this car. What that is the all-new AmPro rear double wishbone suspension. Now, I already hear people complaining, oh, I bought the other one. Well, I'm sorry, my friends, this is what progress looks like. The good news is the rear lower control arms are Superfly 2's rear lower control arms. Hubs are unique to Superfly 3, and that is a result of getting the proper track as well as the CVD axles to get them to properly fit. Again, links to all these things are going to be in the description of the video covering that portion of the build. The transmission housings are completely brand spanking new AmPro parts. These were a nightmare to build simply because there isn't room to do what I did. The amount of engineering necessary to do this was ridiculous, but I got everything in there. All of the factory gears bolt right in. No modification at all to any of the factory Tamiya Hornet gears. I did forget something. I forgot somewhere to mount the power switch. The good news is, what you're looking at here, although is technically Superfly 3, it's Superfly 3 Beta. Superfly 3 production is mostly here. So although I have built Superfly 3 and the build video will be on this car, none of the parts are the same. They look 99.5% identical, but everything is different. A lot of changes have occurred to the chassis, one of them being now there's somewhere to mount the power switch, which I'd forgotten early on. There's also areas where I thickened a lot of these bosses to make them significantly more rigid. On the production model, the whole nose is actually different. I think this one is stubbier. Yeah, it's stubbier and fits the body better. And these panels actually tuck up under the body. So again, there's a lot of weird things on Superfly Beta over here that the production model will not have. Everything shown is either in Shapeways nylon or in multi-jet fusion. So these are all MJF parts. So you can see this right here. That's that piece I was talking about earlier. It bolts somewhere around there. This piece bolts on top of it. For my vehicle, I decided to leave a lot of the parts bare, but I went ahead and painted all the other stuff. And that's what I'm going to do here as well. I've got to get a paint scheme going for this so that I can build and validate this version, the production model, and not just rely on Beta's work. I can already hear you asking, well, is this going to be on my manufacturer? Can I buy the STL? Yes and no. Some of the parts, the majority of the parts will be on my manufacturer. There are some key parts that will absolutely never be able for home print, and that is simply due to intellectual property theft. I cannot tell you how many of my parts are on eBay for sale right now from Chinese vendors. I also realized that I designed copies of the Tamiya Hornet wheels. Why would I have done that? Why would I have done that? Why do that when you can design Libras? So now I have these Libras available. These are only for Superfly 3, but I might as well make a set for the standard Hornet. I mean, that's easy enough. They are not 3-piece wheels. They're standard 1-piece wheels because there's really no point to make 3-piece wheels for these. I will have to figure out a variation of this car's wheels and tires that actually have some grip. So that'll be coming up soon, but you can see what's been going on over here. The rears, by the way, are also standard hex drive, but the offset is probably weird, so I would not recommend that. Oh, I can just get some off-the-shelf wheels and tires and think they're going to fit Superfly because they likely won't. I know you're wondering about driving this car. I don't have any footage of this right now because I really never intended to show this particular car off for anything other than the build video, but I will say this. To those of you who have driven a Hornet, this is not like driving a Hornet. Nothing about this car is like a Hornet. So if you love the Hornet, you'd better love its looks because its handling characteristics are not here. Would I call this like driving a modern buggy? Absolutely not. This is a very, very basic car that has some adjustability. You know, you can adjust the camber, you can adjust the rear toe, and that is it. There's really not much to it. But this car was never intended to be some kind of high performance race car. No, it was just designed for me to turn the Hornet into what I had always anticipated. So the last thing I want to do is give somebody the impression that you're going to buy this, take it to the track, and blow the doors off of modern buggies. You're not. Well, I don't know. Maybe you are. Maybe you're just that good of a driver. I can't. Maybe you can. This is going to be ridiculously expensive if you get all these parts through Shapeways. I cannot imagine anybody as ridiculous as me that would do this, but I've met some crazy folks out there. So if you are interested in this car, please note you do not have to buy it in one lump sum. You can slowly turn your Hornet into this using a lot of off-the-shelf Ampro parts that already exist. I think the best seller here is going to be the rear independent suspension, since it will bolt directly up to a regular Hornet. So I'll probably be showing a video off of that relatively soon. Again, I do have a brand new gearbox, absolutely gorgeous MJF prints, nice little detailed lap joint in here, very nice tight details to help keep sediment and debris out of the gearbox. all your little mounting points for your ball bearings. Anybody who's familiar with the Tamiya Hornet gearbox will see that this looks just like it, save for tiny details like your pivot point for your A-arms. And then because I wanted this to bolt directly into a regular Hornet, this part looks pretty familiar too. It's a very similar piece that would normally go onto the Grasshopper to secure the transmission with one pivot point. Again, I saw no reason to segregate the Hornet from Superfly. Plus, it gives the impression that it is just a Hornet. And that's kind of what I love the most about this. If this thing was all sprayed completely black, had a factory box art Tamiya Hornet body with some white wheels on it, nobody would look twice at this car. It would just look like your plain old Hornet, and that is absolutely what I was going for. You simply cannot beat perfection when it comes to the cosmetics, which is so ridiculously ironic when it comes to the Hornets. My friends, please stay tuned. All of the videos for Superfly 3's build are done. Every last one. The only thing holding me up now is just building the production model, which I've really got to get done. Hang in there. Everything's coming soon. I hope you liked the video. Thank you for 400 videos, and I would imagine that I'll see you at 800, 1200, and more. We'll see you next time.